The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMSI.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Humanity First. I'm Peter Evers, your host, and today we're in for a bit of a treat. We are having the director of our community service agency, Charlotte's going to come in, and she's going to talk a little bit about the network of services that we provide, and many other providers are looking to provide for families in and around Brockton and the whole state of Massachusetts. And that sort of got me to thinking a little bit about this notion of community. We have built a system of care in Massachusetts that ensures that children and families get services that they need. It's not adequate because it's difficult to resource those services, and there are so many needs at the moment. I was looking through Facebook the other night, and because of my age, there's a lot of in the old days sort of conversations that goes on, strings of conversation, and pictures of streets in England where I grew up from the 1970s, and how it was so much different then, and how families were connected to neighborhoods, and neighbors would speak to each other and look after themselves and provide essentially a safety net for those people who were struggling. I don't know how much different it is nowadays, but there has been a bit of a separation around that. It is unusual for grandparents to live along in the next street from parents when they're raising their kids. And so there is a need for us to make sure that we're providing that kind of network of support for people, because raising a family and raising children in this environment is a difficult thing to do. I think it's always been difficult, but these are a different set of circumstances that we're dealing with when you think about increasing violence in America, gun violence, how kids don't feel safe at school, and how isolated kids can be because of the use of technology and gaming. Much of what I think happened in the past, which was active play, has been replaced by sedentary lifestyles in terms of staring at a screen. And that isn't really a criticism of anything. It's really an observation that we have to be aware of as we go forward. And we don't really know what the effects of the brain are on screen time. And so it's always good to sort of balance that with the idea of getting to know your neighbors, not being isolated, and feeling a connection with where you live. And it is up to us as a society to provide those opportunities for people. So we're going to talk with Charlotte in a couple of minutes. We'll be right back. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm an essential worker here at BAMSI, and I'm a nurse. Nurses are essential here at BAMSI because as nurses, we really have the opportunity to make an impact. We have very small ratios, so we have the opportunity to really learn everything about the person served and be able to give the best care. It really serves such a great purpose for me as being a nurse, and really why I came into nursing. Learn more about nursing opportunities at bamsijobs.org.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMSI.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Humanity First. As I mentioned before, my name is Peter Evers, and I have the privileges of working at BAMSI. And actually, today we have another BAMSI employee. We have Charlotte Fenstermaker. Charlotte, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I mentioned before to the audience that we're going to talk about kids today, kids in a fairly narrow fashion, actually. And I think anybody that's listened to the show before will know that a lot of our work at BAMSI is done in the community. A lot of our work is done making sure that children have the services that they need in home. And we go back, and I know you go a long way back on this. And I should say that Charlotte is actually the director of our community service agency. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means as we go forward. But just a little bit of history that you and I have lived. The community service agency is part of the Children's Behavioral Health Initiative, which really began in 2004 when the federal government sued Massachusetts, saying that far too many children were separated from their families and they were spending time in hospitals and in long-term residential placements. A lot has changed in the last 20 years, and if you can believe it, it is actually 20 years. And since that lawsuit came about $1 billion later, we have a system of care that didn't exist really before 2004. And people in the audience may remember it as the Rosie D. versus Romney, which was the original lawsuit, which changed into the Children's Behavioral Health Initiative. So, Charlotte, running a CSA, running the Community Service Agency, tell us a little bit about what that entails.
Sure. So the Community Service Agency really is the overarching group that oversees intensive care coordinators and the family support and training, or what we normally call family partners. And these are CBHI services, the Child Behavioral Health Initiative, as you mentioned, that can be accessed for anyone that has a Mass Health product. They can have a insurance that is community-based or commercial insurance as well. But either way, they're able to access this in order to receive intensive care coordination. And this allows the family to have someone that is trained in understanding what the different resources are available in the community, allowing them to work with someone that can help them make those referrals and also help guide them to make those referrals on their own. And so when the intensive care coordination closes out, they now have those skills and abilities to move forward on their own should they need to receive support in the future.
What's a typical family, and how do you hear about them?
Yeah, so we receive referrals from schools, from DCF, from the Department of Children and Family. We receive referrals from mobile crisis intervention, outpatient providers that maybe they see that the family needs a little bit more support, helping to access things that they might need in the school or in the community that is beyond what they're able to accomplish in an outpatient setting. And so it's hard to say what a typical family is, because really every situation is unique. But I would say that it would be an individual that meets criteria for a diagnosis of some sort for behavioral or emotional disturbance. And also there's multiple needs that have to be addressed. So more than one agency is likely going to be involved. And so that intensive care coordinator is there to support the communication between those different organizations and the family, to make sure that the family understands what everyone is doing, what their role is, and they move forward to help the youth.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important things is that coordination of all of the providers, right? Because I think it can be a bit of a nightmare for parents and kids when different people are providing different interventions and different levels of care and nobody's talking to each other. And I think back in 2004, when this all came about, there really was a recognition that there were some great professionals out there who were doing the work, but they weren't necessarily talking to each other. And maybe sometimes they were doing things that were counterintuitive to what another provider was doing. So that idea of bringing everybody together is hugely important. Do you find that you see a noticeable improvement in the systems over the years as that system of care has grown up?
Yeah, so my experience is that I've been involved with the mental health system in Massachusetts since 2009, and on the in-home therapy and therapeutic mentor side of things. And we always were collaborating with intensive care coordinators and family partners to help bridge the gaps for the families. And there's been a huge improvement. This is an opportunity for families to understand the multiple services that they're often referred to. And a lot of times there's so many people calling them and saying, you were referred by this agency or that agency, and they say, okay, and they say yes to services, but they really don't know exactly what is everybody's role and what is everyone supposed to do. And having the intensive care coordinator there in the monthly meetings that take place with all the providers gives the family an opportunity to know what everyone's doing, have the providers know what everyone's doing as well. And it also helps eliminate like duplication of services. So if, there's a service that's in place that's really overlapping with another service, the family can determine which one of those services that they think they need.
Right.
And then they don't have to have so many different services.
Yeah, I like the way you said that, because there's a couple of big changes, lots of big changes that have happened over the past 20 years in mental health. One of them, I think, is the recognition that the family's in the driving seat, that when you receive services, basically you are making decisions about your family's future and taking advantage of the advice and the help and therapeutic intervention that we can give and other providers can give. The other thing I think is lived experience. Talk a little bit about how much that's made a difference in terms of the treatment model that we're offering.
Yes, lived experience. This is the buzzword of the decade. And specifically, family partners, or the family support and training piece of the CSA, is a lived experience position. What we have done is found parents that have had to navigate the systems, whether it be through school, Department of Children and Families, mental health agencies, throughout their years. And we've asked them to step up and help us help other families. And we've given them training that helps them to work with the different families. And it's such a unique opportunity for a parent to have another parent right there beside them and to help them go through the challenges that they're experiencing and help them understand what is an individualized education plan? How do I get one of those for my child if they need one? What are the steps that I have to go through in order to help my child learn the best that they can, as an example? Or, what is on my Department of Child and Families plan that I need to help accomplish? And how do I do that? And having another parent there that's able to guide them through that is just a very special opportunity.
Yeah, and I'd like to take a minute to say a shout out to our Parent Information Network as well, which covers the Southeast, which is, again, a program that's been run with the finances from Department of Mental Health for the last probably 15 years. And again, it's that notion that somebody understands that somebody's been through difficulty, that they've encountered difficulty, they've taken that difficulty on, and they've managed to move on with their lives, that the serious emotional disturbance of that child doesn't define this family. This family is still a functioning family. And also normalizing, I think, some of those feelings. I've been working in mental health for many years, and there's one thing that I'm struck by is the isolation that people who struggle with a mental illness feel, and that idea of letting people know that I've been through that. This is my journey, I think, is just incredibly important. Now, the CSAs are a network of programs that cover the state, right?
Yes. So the state, I believe, contracts with each of the different areas to establish a community service agency. So we have our particular service area includes Brockton and the surrounding towns, but there's also a community service agency, for example, in Plymouth that covers Plymouth and the surrounding towns there. And then there's one in Canton that covers that area. So anywhere in the state of Massachusetts, someone can access the community service agency, and they all offer intensive care coordination and family partners.
That's right, because you used to work at the Plymouth Hub before you came here, right?
Yes, something similar. The Plymouth Hub was a grant-funded program. It was a little different because we covered all of Plymouth County, and we worked to kind of help link adults and children. But we did work very closely with the CSA in Plymouth for that exact reason. And we worked with BAMSI.
Yeah, which is maybe how you got
Maybe.
here in the end. Well, we're glad to have you. When I think about what's happened over the last 4 years, and I don't think you can have a conversation about the state of the mental health of this country without recognizing what we've been through as a country, as an entire world, really, in terms of the disruption that has happened to kids, families, everybody in the workplace, at home. You think about young parents who had to give up work in order to school their children over the pandemic. What do you see? You're right at the coalface of this. What are the lasting legacies of this pandemic that we still need to manage and look after?
Yeah, one of the challenges that we do find as intensive care coordinators is the I wouldn't say lack of resources, but just the long time that it takes to access resources, because there are, it seems, fewer providers that are providing in-person or outreach services to youth. And that can be a barrier to families being able to move forward, is not being able to access the appropriate services for their youth. I see that as a direct impact from the pandemic. Before this, we never thought twice about going into homes, and now a lot of people do.
Yep.
And same thing with families inviting people in. They feel the same way. So while we do have some virtual options, we are in the process of trying to get back in person, because we do know that that's the best way to provide services and really have a caring and cooperative and really an approach that will allow people to really understand what's going on. That in person it's just really hard to not have that.
Yeah, there's no substitute for it, really. I mean, especially for those folks, they get an idea of what's going on a day-to-day basis. And it does strike me, and I bang this drum a lot. We should be paying the highest rates to our clinicians who are going into people's homes, who are doing community work. One of the reasons why we don't have so many resources is there are other opportunities for people who, encumber big loans for college and things like that. And then, there might be an online system like BetterHelp that comes along and offers a higher salary to do work in your pajamas. It is really important that we advocate that families that we care for get quality service, because we don't want, really, in this state, to have a two-tier system for those who have and those who have less. And that really begins with making it intriguing for somebody to come into this kind of work. And I guess I'd ask you that. What is it? What would you say to somebody who is contemplating doing this work and coming in? Because I know so many, we've been doing some work with New Heights Charter School, and there are so many young people who say, this is the kind of work I want to be in. What is good about this work? What is satisfying? What makes people stay?
That's a really great question. And I think what I would say is there's nothing like walking in to meet with a family the first time and seeing the struggles that they're going through, and then reminiscing back on that 9 months later, when they now have had several months of in-home therapy and a therapeutic mentor and a family partner and an intensive care coordinator that's helped them coordinate all that, and is getting ready to transition out because the difficulties that they were seeing in the beginning are just not there anymore. Right. They are successful at school. The youth is successful at school. They're starting to be successful in the home, and they're really having an ability to make major changes in a short period of time. And 9 months for a youth is a short period of time.
Yeah. And the other thing I feel about that is that you're also making changes. You're working with people to make changes in their lives that are going to stick, right? And
yes.
And it isn't unusual. I mean, I met somebody that I worked with 20 years ago recently, and we both remembered the particular case that we were talking about. And this individual reached out to this friend of mine and said, I don't know, found her on LinkedIn or whatever, said, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm such and such. We worked together in Brockton when I was a school. who is now as an administrator in the private sector, who completely turned her life around, had a family, and she had the presence of mind to call Melanie, my friend, and say, it was your intervention that helped me on the way. Those kind of stories are why we come into this work, right?
Absolutely. And I wish there was a way that we could hear more of those stories, but we follow our ethical guidelines that when we close, but it is so satisfying when you maybe see someone later on that you recognize, that you've worked with, and you can tell that they're doing well because you just, see them in the community, and you don't necessarily say hi or anything, but that they're doing good. And it's a great feeling. Yeah. It's a great feeling.
Yeah. And that child remained in the community, didn't go into a long-term residential program, went to their music lessons, they played baseball, and they were in school. Wonderful storytelling, Shauna. Thank you so much for coming, and hopefully you'll come back and we can catch up a little later.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody.